Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Time and Space, a Doctor Who podcast. I'm Jessica Nunn.
And I'm our co-host and husband, Phillip Gilfus. Well, darling, we're going to be talking about Doctor Who, obviously.
Obviously. Good call there, baby.
And we're going to be...
We should do like a whole podcast just on Doctor Who.
I don't think that's what the people want. But we're going to be talking about, depending on how you count it, but we'll go with Series 10 of Doctor Who, and this is going to be the classic Series 10. I suppose you confuse people and think we're talking about the last Peter Capaldi series. But yes, no, the Series 10 with the third Doctor, as the Blu-ray was labeled Series 4 to even make it more confusing.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah, well, you know, they're just Series 4 of Jon Pertwee. That's what they do in America. They're just like, this is the series for this particular Doctor.
Okay.
So like the fourth Doctor one I have is Series 1.
Ah.
Or Season 1. But anyway. So yeah, that's the Blu-ray package that we had for that series. So we got finished watching it high definition, got to watch lots of extras.
Lots of extras.
So we're all about it. And so just to refresh people, this series went from 30 December 72 to 23 June of 73. One point of note, there's several, but this sort of ends the Doctor's exile to Earth.
Yes.
Gives him freedom to use the TARDIS and have adventures throughout time and space. Before we get into the episodes, I thought we would highlight the companion for this series, and been the companion for the third Doctor for a while, and that's Jo Grant.
Yep.
Someone we both have gotten to know throughout this watch of the third Doctor, and she leaves or exits at the end of this series. Just thought, any comments you wanted to have about Jo Grant in and of herself?
I have thoroughly enjoyed Jo Grant. Not much more than I thought I would, because I didn't really have any thought. But I really like her a lot. She's up there with Sarah Jane and Ace in my book.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of traditional, well, whatever that word means, but traditional companion things that she ticks, you know, slightly ditzy. I mean, I think it's like on paper she's this ditzy blonde, you know, attractive ditzy blonde. But, like, I think she's definitely way more than that. I mean, I think from the get-go she is. You know, she has all these sort of special skills, you know, that she works for UNIT. She's just not off the street. And, you know, she's not really that ditzy. She's just a little clumsy occasionally.
And she's not, like, she is the traditional damsel in distress, but not in the same way as Perry or Mel, who are just screamers.
Yeah, I don't think she twists her ankle. I mean, you know, in that she's in distress, but it's not like it's her fault, or not that she can't get out of it. But I mean, you know, that just a normal person couldn't get out of it. You know, It's not like, oh, she's this little girl, and that's what she... I mean, it's like none of us could get out of that situation.
Yeah.
So, you know, she has as much skills as any of us do. And, you know, it's interesting. I don't know whether the growth is actually there or not, but there are some episodes or stories, I don't know if it was this series, maybe the end of the last one, where Jo got, I mean, I don't know, I hate to use this word, but for lack of a better word, kind of plucky, but in as much as I mean, she was on her own, and maybe this Carnival of Monsters, I can't remember, there were some certain episodes where she was literally on her own, and she was more than capable.
Yeah.
And was out there, not just like, oh, I'm going to hide here till the Doctor comes, like, oh, no, I'm going to go investigate and see what's going on, and which, I mean, she's been doing that since her first appearance, and that's when she got Master hypnotized, and then I liked it, because I don't know if it was this series or not. Well, I don't know, because Master wasn't in this series anyway. But anyway,
he was a little bit.
Oh, yeah, he was at the end. Maybe this was this series, but because where the Master tries to hypnotize her again, she's like, no, not going to happen this time. She's like, Mary had a little lamb or something like that. She's like, nope, not going to happen this time.
Yeah.
Me
no,
once.
she's delightful.
Mm-hmm.
She's a lot of fun, and you know she's going to go off on other adventures with her exit. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then she always has her unique fashion sense.
Definitely.
Lots of furry coats.
So 70s. So 70s.
Mm-hmm. well, let's get into it. And I was going to say no particular order, in the actual order of the episode. So, the three doctors start off with a bang.
Yep.
You want to read the synopsis there?
I do. Time itself is in peril. The Time Lords find themselves besieged by a mysterious enemy. Vital cosmic energy is draining into a black hole, and the Doctor is their only hope. Trapped in the TARDIS, however, he's powerless. The only way out is to break the first law of time, to let the Doctor help himself. Literally.
So this was an anniversary episode, for those who don't know. I'm sure most folks do. This was an anniversary episode, and we sort of got the background from the producers about Barry Letts and
Terrence Dix.
Terrence Dix. I think I'll call Terry. I can't remember his real name. But anyway, about, this is the first multi-Doctor story there was. Mm-hmm. And that Barry was always like, no, fans were always like, oh, you should do it. And he's like, no, that's stupid. And he's like, wait, why is it stupid?
Why is it stupid?
Yeah. And so, then you get Billy and Pat and Johnny all together, and the Rat Pack, anyway.
Is that what you went with?
Exactly. But, obviously, for those who don't know the story, of course, Bill Hartnell was not doing well, and, good days, bad days, but they caught him on a couple good days, and that's why he wasn't there for the present, or to be present with the other actors, but he sort of did his recordings, and it worked, and in some ways may have worked it better because you had sort of 2 and 3 squabbling, and one comes along and kind of like, stop squabbling, this is what you need to do, and he just pops back every now and then just to put him in a direction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I enjoyed this. It was nice. I like the nostalgic episodes. I always do. Partly because I love the fact that people come back. Mm-hmm. And people want to come back. And people want to be a part of it again. And I just think that's fantastic. And speaks to the legacy of the show and the delightfulness of the show. Is that, people are like, yeah, let's do another one. It'll be fun.
And I did enjoy hearing the ironic sparring between Jon Pertwee and Pat Troughton of their conflicting styles, which in a way made itself on screen to the Doctors arguing among themselves.
Yeah.
And because it doesn't where Jon Pertwee's coming from this complete comic background, but this is his first straight role, and so he's kind of being not in a bad way, but kind of being a serious actor. These are the lines, this is how we do it.
Yeah. And
Pat, who is very classically trained, but then kind of approached his Doctor much more comically.
And looser. He was a little more improv-esque.
Yeah. So he's like, I'll say kind of what the line is, and just how do I know when to say? Well, my dear chap, you just know how, and so but that's what translates on the screen between 2 and 3.
Yeah. And, watching all of the extras and people talking about Pertwee posthumously, and everybody says he's lovely, absolutely delightful. Nobody has a bad word against him. But he also sounds like just a smidgen of a diva. Mm-hmm. They talk about him getting upset because his image was the smallest one in the Radio Times spread that they did. Things like that. He was a lovely person, but very self-aware of his own worth, I guess, maybe.
Well, it seemed like...
And not necessarily in a negative way, just that's a thing.
Because Katie and Katie Manning, who played Jo, in one bonus interview we watched, kind of let one thing out that she thought there was maybe some insecurity there, that because this was his first straight role ever, he's always this comic actor, whether it's on radio or on TV or in movies, and so it's almost an insecurity about, this is my one chance to show
breadth.
And so it's like, don't mess me up, don't mess it up, let's all take this. He wasn't uber serious, but let's, it's pretty professional, we can have fun, but once the camera's on, let's take it seriously. And so then when you have sort of a, someone like Pat come in and be like, that's...
Whatever. It'll be fine, yeah.
And so I think that was interesting to hear. But yeah, the multi-Doctor stories sometimes work, sometimes don't. I do like, we're talking more about the third Doctor, but I think with Pat Troughton, not that I'm a second Doctor expert by any means, but, he had been off the roll for 3 years at this point, but he just comes back, instantly into that role. It's just the second Doctor's right there, just happens to be in color, not black and white. but I think he just...
And he's brought his recorder.
Yeah, and so, which actually ends up saving the day.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. So... anything. And then at this as a reward for the Doctor's, I suppose, success, the Time Lords end his exile on Earth. So, I don't know, having now watched enough of the Third Doctor, we've had 3 series, I guess, of him stuck on Earth. And so there was sort of a comment from one of the producers or actors, like, well, it was the shortest punishment ever. But, would you sort of think of them having to give him back to time and space?
No, I think it's obviously a good thing. I think there's only so much you can do with a Time Lord whose whole thing is time and space, just having him stuck on 20th century Earth.
Mm-hmm. And I think they were saying there was only 2 stories you could ever do: Mad Scientist or Alien Invasion.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were like, oh, we invented the Silurians because it's technically not an alien invasion because they're from Earth.
They were there first, yeah.
And then, with the Master last series being every bloody story. Which they sort of explained as saying, like, we that's our fault. We just got really excited about using the Master. But anyway, so...
And maybe went overboard a little bit.
But anyway, we had Omega, and that was sort of an interesting villain.
Indeed.
Time Lord villain. Sort of expanding the Time Lord story, what little we know, up to this point, so... All right. Well, that brings us into Carnival of Monsters. And want to do that synopsis as well?
The Doctor and Jo arrive on the SS Bernice, a cargo ship crossing the Indian Ocean. Things are not what they seem. A monster appears in the sea, events repeat themselves, and a giant hand steals the TARDIS. Investigation reveals they are inside a mini-scope, an alien peep show sporting numerous miniaturized environments, which showman Vorg and his assistant Shirna have brought to amuse the populace of the planet Interminor.
I have to say, this was one of my favorites, because I think it's a funny show. There's not many funny stories in this era of Doctor Who, or maybe in a lot of Doctor Who, but because it's usually danger and monsters and all that. But this is just, there is danger, but
there's a lot of whimsy to it.
And there's not often solid stories without the Doctor. Like, in other words, the episode starts with Vorg and Shirna, and stays with them, I don't exaggerate, maybe a fourth of the time, and it's their story. Eventually the Doctor and Jo kind of enter that world too, but it's sort of like, but you have the alien machinations and political whatevers, and just going on. It's almost like a separate story, but I think it's solid, and they're amusing characters, and it's contrast between the serious villain and the carnival people, who are the comic relief, and foils, and then you sort of have this surrealistic story with the Bernice, with the time loop, and Jo and Doctor having to sort of do that time loop and
figure it out. And it's interesting. It's a little crowded, I would say, but it's a fantastic idea. And as you say, it's very colorful, and as I say, it's whimsical, and the 2 carnies are a lot of fun and interesting, and that felt a little bit like the Wizard from Wizard of Oz, and a little bit like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in the trolley world.
Island of Make-Believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it was the way the sets were done or something, but, yeah.
You had sort of I don't want to say hokey, but you sort of had the monsters.
Yes, and they were a little hokey. But no, thinking about particularly with the carnies, that's the bit that felt most like the Island of Make-Believe. But it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that one.
And it was interesting. One of the extras we watched had Stephen Moffat and
Mark Gatiss
talking about this, all of the Third Doctor series. But I liked one thing about Moffat, because both of them theoretically were watching this show when they were young. Stephen was like, don't let people put you off. We knew the effects were bad. Like, I like that, because, I don't know. I don't know what it was like to watch TV in Britain in 1972. But Steve was like, no, we knew when it was shoddy, it looked shoddy and whatever. But it was, there was a story there, and that's what we enjoyed. And so, but I did kind of like that.
And then Mark Gatiss in the same interview talking about, despite the hokiness, it was still a little bit trailblazing. You know, the use of the color overlay and things like that. It wasn't great, but it was still very new, and they continued to use it and make interesting choices with it, even though it didn't always ever look realistic. There were interesting choices. It never felt like they were using it just to use it, really.
Right, and I think, you know, because in the extras they were saying Barry Letts was sort of very, very mad about using the CSO, which we would now call green screen. But anyway, which I don't think they use a green screen, they use a different color. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But,
we digress.
Yeah, but, you know, and I think for him it was, how do we keep the show cheap for the BBC, obviously, but how do we do these great alien landscapes? And, you know, if you can just do it like that, then why not just do it like that? And you don't have to sit there and think like, well, now we got to do a studio. Like,
and now we need a location.
Looks like a cheap thing, you know. And so, you know, from this series, just by this series, it did seem like they definitely leaned on the CSO. Not like I'm saying like as a cheap gimmick or anything, but they're like, oh, we got it, let's use it. And so, I mean, I would say like half the time it worked, half the time
but again,
it looked
I think
odd.
in this one they used it in interesting ways. You know, with the Doctor being shrunk down and all. It's all very interesting choices, and it's not the same. It's not like watching Colin Mockery on Whose Line Is It Anyway, where that's the only thing they use it for is to put up this backdrop. They were using it in different ways as well, and that's cool.
Yeah, because
that's cool, baby.
Because the inside of the miniscope does look real. I mean, for what they're trying to create, the Honey I Shrunk the Kids machine look. You know, with the, I forget what the monsters are called. You know, they're puppets and whatever you want to do. But anyway,
and they're bad.
Yeah,
they're bad. But that's also part of it, and it's particularly looking back now. That's part of the nostalgia. It's the same reason, really, that we enjoy watching B movies, you know, because you can look back at it and go, oh, that's terrible, but we can't stop watching because it's cute and nostalgia and kitschy and all of those things.
It's like, I think, you know, it's as with everything, as long as the actors believe it, or showing they believe it, and then there's as long as a story there. Because if you can believe it and it looks stupid, then you just look stupid. But there's also a story there. Because I'm thinking of, like, as an example, Star Trek, obviously. With Star Trek, you know, the arena.
Star Trek was your first example? I'm so unlike you, baby.
With the episode Arena from the original series, where Kirk is fighting the Gorn. I think you watched this, or you saw me watching this recently. The big lizard that's very slow moving.
Oh, right, yes, on the desert.
Yeah.
Presumably in Arizona quarry.
So, you know, it obviously looks silly now, but, you know, and the fighting looks, but, you know, you get the, like, oh, Kirk's in danger, and you're fighting an alien. It's like, okay, well, we're going to let him, you know, whatever.
We can get behind it.
Yeah, so, yeah. But, yeah, I thought that one was funny. And I forget how many episodes. I think these were all 6-parters. I can't remember anyone being super long, any of these.
No, I was thinking that earlier, that they didn't feel...
And I think the Carnival of Monsters, I think, has so much story, like you said, because it's like, this is probably not exact, but, you know, like I said, you have the alien story, and then you have the boat story, and the boat story kind of lasts as, like, the main story for, like, maybe half of the first episode, and then second, and then third, and then you're finally in the different terrains inside the miniscope where they have to travel, and then you have them escaping, and then you have, I think there's enough for 6.
Yes. Yes.
Not always true, but in this one there was, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
In Jodie Whittaker's time, Chris Chibnall would have mushed this down to 1 episode. Then we would have all been very cross about it.
Exactly. So, Frontier in Space. Read that synopsis, please.
The Third Doctor and Jo are caught in the escalating tension between planets Earth and Draconia, and discover that the Master and the Daleks are secretly working to provoke the two into an all-out war.
This is, I mean, I don't know if this was just a British word. Frontier in Space, like now that I know the episode, I can think about it, but I would use an American word because, like, neutral zone in space would be like the American. Like, because they say, like, a frontier is the space between two conflicting
Oh, right.
Whereas, like,
so they could have called it the DMZ.
Basically.
Yeah.
That's what, like,
Yeah.
I mean, that throws me off when I would hear them say frontier, because, you know, frontier of America, you think, like, oh, you know, it's your...
Cowboys.
Conquering the West or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, even space, the final frontier, but they're using it more as a buffer zone.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that's what threw me off a little bit. But now that I know it, every time I hear it, I think, oh, buffer zone. Oh, that's the one with the...
Yeah.
And I actually think this is a little bit of a political thriller.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. I enjoyed this. And I almost resent the Master and the Daleks in this because I don't think you need them.
Yeah.
I think it can absolutely stand on its own as a political thriller. You know, you've got bad guy politicians who are trying to start a war and therefore switching things up. And yeah, I totally think it can stand alone. It doesn't need the Master to prop it up. And I feel like in this one in particular, the Master is used as almost a deus ex machina.
Yeah, and like, I think the Daleks are just tacked on at the end. And it can kind of go both ways, because they're at the end, so it's not like they predominate the story. It's just sort of like, it may literally be, I think maybe it's like the penultimate, or, you know, the last cliffhanger. I think it's like, oh, it's the Daleks. And the last episode is, yep, the Daleks, and then that's it. And then
I don't remember the Daleks particularly in this one, because, again, not necessary.
I think, because then you just sort of have to go into Planet of the Daleks after this, which theoretically, tangentially, is supposed to be connected to Frontier in Space. So you didn't need to do that. It just could have been two different stories.
Yep. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. But other than that, I really liked this episode. The idea that they're disguising this third race coming in as aggression from either side. And then the political machinations that go on behind that, you know, you're overstepping the treaty. We're not overstepping the treaty. You're overstepping the treaty. No, you are. No, you are, you know.
I mean, there's probably a better analogy, but since it's the 70s, very Cold War, because you have the Draconians who are, you know, you'd see them and you're like, oh, those are they're the villains. They're like, no, they're just regular people. You know, they're not the baddies at all. They're just the regular, they're just, you know, they're Soviets or whatever, or, you know, whatever you want to say. I mean, they're people. They're just regular people. And then to be that sort of both sides are right, both sides are wrong, you know, because even the President of Earth, who's kind of good, but then she's also, you know, also is quick,
political. Yeah,
you know, quick to see the other side. And you have the sort of I forget his position, the general or whoever, who is trying to push war too, and then you have sort of even the Earth politics, where you have, like, I forget what they show. There's like a governor or a senator or something, you know, and he's like, oh, they're out to get us. We need to fight back first, you know, and it's all very familiar. It doesn't matter what time you're in, and it's got the news screens with the
Chiron. Yeah, all of that is quite political and quite relevant, and very real.
Mm-hmm. And then, and then the Orgons? I can't remember. Kind of the monkey-looking aliens. I can't remember what they were. They're sort of the grunty, dumb bad guys, so just a little more stereotypical at times. But yeah, it was good. You know, I was trying to think also for this one, for 6 episodes. I guess the Daleks and Master maybe added an episode of a story where, you know, where if you didn't have them, maybe it went on a little long. But there's still enough there for the back and forth. And I did think, in this series, and of course it's every series, but I think maybe this story, if I'm not misremembering, where I swear the Doctor gets, like, put in prison, like, every episode, like, newly, like, he escapes, goes back in, next episode he escapes, goes back, next episode joking. So I was like, okay, guy, a little much.
Yeah, now he's in there with Joe, now he's escaped. Now he's in there with the Master, now he's escaped. Yeah, it was a little bit
repetitive, but
never mind.
Mm-hmm. And then we go into Planet of the Daleks, which, I don't know, I think I'm maybe among this episode. Well, go ahead and read the synopsis there before I judge it.
I know. Arriving on Spiridon, the Third Doctor and Joe encountered a Thal group, but the Daleks are here, and this time they're invisible.
What did you think of this one?
I liked the callback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to the very first Daleks. Yeah.
Yes, and so I appreciated that, and possibly felt a little smug because I knew it was a callback. Also interesting in this one is Joe's romance.
Oh yes.
Considering
what happens.
Where we are in the timeline, yeah. There is a little romance. The guy does ask her to stay, and she chooses not to. Mm-hmm. And that's very interesting. Again, seeing where we go next.
Because I think it's almost... Yeah, I would say like in old Who, and this is like, the 10th series. This is how old can it possibly be? But like I'm talking before, like in the black and white era, you could almost see it would have been this easy of an exit for a companion. Oh, we just met, like sort of a Susan.
I was going to say, this is exactly what Susan does.
Yep.
And she chooses not to go this time.
But I mean... Because the relationship almost seemed more the guy than Joe.
Yeah.
But like, that would have been it in black and white. Oh, yeah, that's good enough. They're off to get married.
Off she pops.
We don't have to establish anything deeper other than they went on an adventure together, maybe held hands once and tick.
Yeah. Is tick a euphemism? But other than that, I thought it was probably
that's going down the Amazon.
The weakest.
Yeah, I was about to say, out of all of this series, I'd say Planet of the Daleks is probably the most stereotypical Doctor Who story of... Yeah,
I was not crazy about it. Purple carpet monsters.
That's true. Yeah, which I
assume that ultimately Joe skinned one of those and used them to make a coat.
I mean, from a production standpoint, yeah, it's very, like, they're invisible. They just have to wear big fur coats, so we don't have to make any elaborate. Just make a big furry thing and done.
But the amount of purple furry material, and where do you find that? I assume maybe a rug shop, because shag rugs are a big thing at this 70s, point. Yep. Yeah, so maybe that's what it is. They're all wearing shag rugs over them. Mm-hmm. And it gave them the opportunity to play Trojan horse, right? Obviously, yep. Mm-hmm. But yeah, too many people. And again, I think too much going on. Like, they've got this one team that has been there for I don't know how long. Right. And then another team shows up, but only a few of them are alive. And then a bunch from the other one dies. And then the woman from the second team is in some sort of relationship with one of the guys from the first team. And then another guy from the first team just wants to roll head first into all of this. But of course, he ends up... A lot of deaths.
Right. Bombs.
Yeah. So a lot of, hey, get to know this character. Now we're going to kill him. Mm-hmm. Hey, get to know this character. Not going to kill him. And the problem with the Thals is that they all look alike anyway.
Yeah, the Aryan race, not much interesting there.
And so then you're like, who just died? Yeah. Who was that?
It was the blonde tan one.
Oh, right.
The man, though.
The man, not the... Right, got it. So, yeah. Not... Definitely the weakest out of these. And
I think... And I was wondering... In any of the extras we saw, it doesn't necessarily say why they brought the Daleks back, other than it had been a while, and people keep asking about it. So there you go, I guess. But like, as we would often say, why? What makes this interesting for the Daleks? And nothing. I don't think really.
No.
Nux makes them interesting.
What might have been interesting is some sort of revenge. Mm-hmm. Considering they're bringing back both the Thal and the Daleks, and those, of course, were originally the same race, and the Daleks mutated due to radiation bombs, and the Thals did not, and so they have this problem on their own planet. Coming back to that, bringing that back around might have been more interesting. And leaving the shag carpets completely out of it might have been...
Yeah, and I can see, like, how do we make the Daleks more interesting? They can cloak. They never said that word. But they can cloak now. That's cool, isn't it? And I'm like, okay. I suppose. But I think the thing about the Daleks is supposed to be their look. If you make them invisible, then...
Yeah, and they also don't really do a whole lot with it.
No.
And so...
Just the first time, that's it.
Yeah. So, yeah. They could have improved it, I think.
Yeah, so, like I said, Jo's on her own for this one a little bit. She put some bombs together, all that. So that's about.
Well, she's with her romantic.
That's right.
Her paramour.
That's right. All right. Well, speaking of paramours, we get with the series Ender and the Green Death.
Yes. Here we go. When a dead man is found glowing bright green at an abandoned coal mine, Unit and the Third Doctor travel to the South Wales town of Llachferfach, convinced that pollutants from the nearby global chemicals are responsible. The Doctor faces opposition from the company director Stevens, the mysterious boss, and deadly giant maggots. I apologize in advance for my Welsh pronunciation. I think I definitely did better than Phillip could have done, though, so I get credit for that.
It's made up anyway. I think it was the real place was dairy or something anyway.
Yes.
I guess before we get into it, most of the extras we watched on the Blu-ray were about the Green Death, and I think a lot of it is because Joe obviously leaves at the end of this. But in as much as everything with the whole episode, did you think it deserved all the attention that people seem to have for it?
To a certain extent, I do. I think it was my favorite out of all of them. Again, because of the timeliness of it, or the timelessness of it, which is perfectly acceptable in a time and space. This is an example. We spent so much time talking about Jodie Whittaker's last season, where they were trying to make it relevant. And, plastics are destroying the earth. And it felt so preachy. And this didn't. This did exactly what Chibnall wanted to do in this last series without being preachy.
Because it's interesting that you have these characters, you have Professor Jones, and the Nut Hutch. I can't believe they kept saying that. The Nut Hutch, and Joe. So obviously he's sort of expounding these, environmentally aware and all these things. And so you would think, they're preaching. But it's just the characters, Because, the Doctor, in and of itself, I don't think he ever actually says
takes
much.
A position.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree 100% about that. And again, as you say, those were character-driven words rather than na-na-na-na.
Because I think it's even have the Brigadier, who you think would be, Granddad, and he kind of walks the line. I mean, he's still who he is, but he's like, this is great. And they're like, it's mushroom. He's like, really? Okay. Tasted like beef. We're going to have beef next. And they're like, this is more mushroom. Okay.
This is definitely beef. Nope, more mushroom. And as we learned in the extras and things, this was a little bit before its time.
Right.
Particularly, we think now about mushrooms being very much a meat substitute. You don't want a hamburger with beef or anything like that. You can get a mushroom hamburger. And even the use of corn, which I don't know do Americans know? It's Quorn.
Oh, I heard them say that. I assumed it was CW because we were talking Welsh.
It's Quorn.
Yeah.
Which is, my first year in England, I lived with a vegetarian. And so she would buy corn, and that's what we would use in our tacos and things like that. And it's a meat substitute that's mushroom-based.
Oh, yeah. No. I don't think that's a thing.
Yeah. So,
America.
very much. I'm not sure if there's a correlation between corn and Paul McCartney's first wife, Linda McCartney, because of course she also has a line. I can't remember if those two are intertwined at all, and that's wildly irrelevant. But she's what I think about when I think about corn for some reason, and even eating it, I didn't realize it was a mushroom-based.
It's like mushroom jerky,
like mushroom jerky. Yeah, I mean it was just a substitute. It was just a thing. So.
Yeah, and I don't know, because I'm American. It's interesting. We watched The Crown recently with, what's the town's name anyway? Forgotten the town, with the Welsh.
Oh, yeah, Aber or something.
I know. Yeah, you're all listening to this know what it is.
Yeah.
But anyway, the 60s big accident that was dramatized in The Crown recently in their season 3.
Mining tragedy that killed all the children, in a local school. And
then this one here, I mean, to me, Wales is really a character in this, which, because I think it's, interesting because, Doctor Who, once it was resurrected, I don't know the word to use, resurrected is, BBC Wales is who does Doctor Who now, whereas, this was BBC Maine, I don't know, whatever you call it. So, we know all the sites of Wales from the newer series, even though it's not always Wales. It's just what, But I think here, this is Wales. This is, you have the miners, you have all those people, you have, Professor Jones doing his full Welsh accent and everything, and all that, just sort of bringing that part alive. Because I don't think, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, there's that much regionalism in Doctor Who up to this point. Not that necessarily everything's in London, but it just is where it is.
Yeah, so it's in a vague British place.
Yeah. Every now and then they'll go to, maybe some countrysides, but it's not necessarily like, oh, you're now in northern London, or northern England, or Scotland, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think this is sort of its first time, like, yes, you are in Wales.
This is definitely Welsh, yeah. And I found it interesting, again, looking at the extras, we learned that the coal mine where they filmed this closed down a couple of years later. Yeah. And even the theme of the show, the ethos of that episode is, yes, that's a good thing, coal is dying. Which, I think they actually say that at one point in the episode, and I had one of my Trump I moments, because even in the 70s, the coal was dying. But the coal mine closed down, and Katie Manning and the guy who played, Stuart something, the guy who played Professor Jones, go back to the village of Derry and speak with a couple of former coal miners who were actually in or a part of Doctor Who episode. And the sadness that they clearly felt with the coal mine closing. One of them talks about his dad was in the coal mines and his granddad was in the coal mines. And for all that us, or me, and other liberals look at coal as a bad thing, and I think it is a bad thing, partly because I'm a big old liberal, realizing that completely shutting it down does change people's lives. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it does mean you have to understand where the other side's coming from in terms of loss of culture to an extent, and loss of revenue and loss of jobs. They talk about this particular coal mine shutting down, and 1,000 people lost their jobs. And in a place and in a job where things are still a little bit hand to mouth anyway, that sort of thing can be absolutely devastating to a community. And even though it's the right thing to do, and finding alternatives of energy that are better for the planet is absolutely the right thing to do, also being able to see the consequences and understand that no matter what you do, no matter how much computer training you promise you're going to get these guys to replace their jobs, it is still very much a loss and is very much going to be a grief. And I think that particular extra highlighted that in an interesting way.
Yeah, because and again, I'm just an American, what do I know? But I think watching The Crown and watching this episode, maybe it's old Wales. I mean, is that the Wales of today, which apparently is now doing Doctor Who filming, because, what's the economic replacement there, between the coal industry, and apparently you get Doctor Who to film there for BBC Wales. But, what else is there for that economic transition? As you have in America, whether it's West Virginia or Pennsylvania or all the other coal areas, once you take coal away, for good or for ill, what replaces a lot of these folks who, as you say, that's the only culture they know, it's the only training they know, and then who's there to replace it?
Yeah, and even if you replace it with something so much better, it's still a complete loss of identity in a lot of ways, and hearing that grief, I think, is important. I think because people go, oh, we're going to close the coal mines, but it's going to be all right. We're going to have jobs for you. We're going to train you. It's going to be fine. I don't see what the problem is. Well, the problem is you're completely losing a way of life that's all you've known, and you've got to hear that and understand that grief, and you can't just platitude that away.
Yeah, but it was interesting to watch Katie and Stuart, because this was, I think, filmed last year in 2019. of them revisiting all these sites in Wales, and meeting the people who were either adults when they looked at the film, or even people who were kids who snuck away from school and watched the filming, and saw Jon Pertwee perched on top of a rock pretending to be attacked by a bird and stuff like that. And so it was kind of very, very interesting to see the locals get the revisiting and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was really lovely. And they went down to local pub, and people just had stories. I have a story for you. I want to tell you about my grandmother who invited Pertwee in for tea and didn't have a clue who he was, and all of those sorts of. It was just lovely. It was really nice. That was a gorgeous extra to include. And
because one of my favorites was like one guy, and if I understood it correctly, because maybe I wasn't following it, he's actually a miner or something, and got on camera because I guess it's something like they needed something torched, or a metal piece, I'm using the wrong words, torched or broken or whatever. And I guess due to union rules, they couldn't have anyone else to do it. Like, they can't just fake it, so they had to bring in an actual miner, and so he's on TV.
So there he is on camera. Yeah. No, that was the whole thing was just really interesting.
So,
and also interesting on the tail end of my diatribe, which I apologize for. But the two miners that they who take Katie and
Stuart
to where the mine used to be, both of them talk about the green's grown back. And that's not a sad, that's a positive that even they see, the green has come back.
It's like a park now.
Yeah. So the land healed itself, as it were. So even with positives, there's still grief, but there's also positives. So yeah, I'm done. I'm done.
Well, I think an interesting thing, when we were watching, of course, we were yelling hippie at Professor Jones with the nut hutch.
With total affection, by the way.
But I think the interesting thing was...
And Cher. Don't forget Cher
exactly.
in the back.
Yeah, about... Just because the change, and again, wasn't alive in the 1970s in Britain, but even now, even stuff they're saying now, it depends what part of the country you live in here in the United States, but, here in the South, people are all, if you meet someone who's like, yeah, no, I don't eat meat anymore, we just do mushrooms now. And you're like, okay, you're weird. But it's just, but I say that jokingly. But, the stuff that Professor Jones's folks were doing, were just such this big change that nothing was wrong with it. Everything they're doing is great, but it's just this big change, and which is how society, you'll have the people who make the big change, everyone kind of looks at them weird, and then, of course, 20 years later, we're all doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so, but it was just interesting, like, because there are alternate fuels, alternate food supply.
Well, and he talks about, Professor Jones talks about the nut hutch being run by energy from the river, the local river, and things like that, and talking about harnessing new ways through wind, and then when we go visit the Welsh site, there's one place where there's this big wind turbine, and I'm like, yep, there you go. The wind must have been blowing that day, because the wind turbine seemed to be working.
I didn't steal all the wind.
It didn't seem to steal all the wind.
Wasn't giving cancer to everyone.
I didn't see any birds dying either, so there's that.
A lot of mistaken. And so what'd you think about our exit of Joe?
It was very bittersweet. They built the romance a little better, but it still felt a little quick. Yeah,
because they're yelling at well, they don't seem to have the nicest relationship for the first 3 episodes, and then and I laughed, but whatever, it worked. But now that I think about it, they sort of have the stereotypical by the fire, laying down by the fire,
Oh yeah, in her nightie. I think that there were definite places where you could see his fondness for her. And I don't know necessarily that we saw it as much from Joe. But as we've talked about, I'm not 100% sure that Katie Manning knows that. I think Katie Manning is I've thoroughly enjoyed seeing her every time we saw her. But she seems to be a little bit aromantic.
As far as commitment, maybe.
Yes, yeah. She has lovely love affairs and falls in love often and walks away just as easily, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, I think it's interesting that in some ways throughout the story, in both real life, that, Katie has myopia or whatever it's called with her. She cannot see very well close up. Or at all, I suppose.
Yeah.
But anyway, that, having the parallel between how she meets Professor Jones being the parallel to how she met the Doctor with the clumsiness and the...
knocking things over, yeah.
So...
Which I didn't realize until they showed the two side by side later on. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's really nice.
Mm-hmm. And then we were talking earlier about how, and often you get companion farewells, we haven't really focused on that we talked about that the other episode. How do they deal with the companion? How do they deal with the Doctor? And, with this one, the whole romance kick you out, it's kind of an borderline sexist, but whatever, it works, I suppose, of, kicking and getting rid of a companion. And like you said, this one works, a little rushed, but it works, it's better as anything else does.
Yeah, and this is different. Like, the Doctor kicks Susan out.
Yeah.
And leaves without
Makes
her.
the choice for her.
Makes the choice for her. Which is probably indicative of the whole relationship if you want to really delve deep into the Doctor and Susan. The Doctor would have been perfectly happy with Jo not going this time. And she makes that choice. She's staying. She's not going with him. She's off with her next adventure man.
And then to show how the Doctor, the acting of Jon and the writing of the episode of how the Doctor then relates to that about, because you said you noticed how the Doctor doesn't look the Professor in the eye or doesn't,
Yeah, is very jealous. And not in any sort of, it didn't feel like a romantic jealousy. It just felt like you're taking my best friend away. So, yeah.
And then we have the Doctor driving by himself on Bessie into the
Off
sunset.
into the sunset. Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was a lovely ending.
Yeah, it seemed like, and not that we know it, I suppose, but again, like this series of the Third Doctor seems to be sort of where everything gels. You have the Unit family, you have a touch of the Master, because that was all last season, and like everything's working on all cylinders. But then you sort of have the behind the scenes of like, I'm trying to remember the act. So Roger Delgado passes away. And then... No, actually, it's the wrong way. I knew I was going to get it wrong. Sorry. Jo leaves first, because I think that was in the can. Katie was going to leave. So that was already done.
The announcement, but they hadn't filmed it.
Right, but it was sort of going to happen.
Yeah.
And then Roger dies, because there's a myth that she left because Roger died. And he had already... Everything was done already. So anyway, and then Roger dies. And then you sort of have, going into the next series, there's... Roger's gone, and more Master, at least with him, and then new companion. You're sort of getting the sort of like, and then they sort of have the Barry and Terry are just sort of thinking of leaving, as the producers, and sort of this is like, all right, so this is the last season then, right?
Yeah.
So this was sort of the pure. I mean, not to take anything as far as quality for whatever comes next, because we haven't seen it yet. But anyway, this was sort of like, okay, this is the end, and so
the denouement, the tying up of loose ends.
Yeah. And so, I mean, because I think they asked Katie, why did Jon, leave Doctor Who? And maybe this was coming, writing was on the wall by this point. So,
yeah, and it sounds like between Jon Pertwee and Katie Manning and the Unit boys, they were such a tight-knit group that once one decided to leave, it all sort of started to unravel. And
gives permission for other people to start.
Absolutely. Gives and not only gives them permission to do it, but makes them begin to think about what's next, I guess. Recognizing the tenuousness of it, and
things can't last forever.
Yeah.
Well, and some series know that, and some don't.
Yeah.
Some try to go on forever,
yeah.
long past the,
But again, I think with her going, the others were able to see that.
I mean, Grey's Anatomy's in its 98th season.
It
right?
is definitely in its 98th season. Yeah, I need to catch up, but I've sort of gotten lost in the...
And also I think that this may be one of the few times, and without knowing everyone's backstory, that this was a harmonious team. Because, we're going to get Tom Baker eventually, and he's Tom Baker. I doubt he was, Jon Pertwee, top of the call sheet. Definitely created probably a different feeling than Tom did.
Yes.
So I don't know anything about Peter and Colin, which obviously that's a tumultuous time in and of itself, and then Sylvester when things were on the way out. But as far as creating that family feeling,
this series is definitely the utopia, I think, in a way that we might not see until Matt Smith and Amy and Rory. Yeah.
So.
And in a way we wanted to see with Jodie Whittaker and her companions and haven't really.
Mm-hmm. They were just sort of being told fam. Don't always get shown fam.
Yeah, whereas this is a fam.
Yeah.
And it's very clear. And people have interesting, like when Jo announces she's getting married to Professor Jones, and you get Yates's reaction a little bit, of I thought maybe... No? Okay. They're just these lovely moments that I think are born out of not just understanding where the characters have gone, but also this familiarity amongst each other. And yeah.
Well, anything about any other extras that we watched that you want to comment on? I know there were a lot.
Yeah, we talked about
a lot of Katie being interviewed, but a lot of other stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, we went back and watched Sarah Jane and Katie together.
Oh yeah, we're going to
Sarah
talk about
Jane
that.
And Jo.
The Doctor's Death was included on the Blu-ray from the Sarah Jane adventures, and so it was sort of a chance to having watched the Jo Chronicles with the Third Doctor, seeing her return to Doctor Who, and how that all tried to coalesce together with Russell T Davies not only getting to write the 11th Doctor, because obviously that's a Moffat character, but getting to bring back Sarah Jane. Well, I mean, he was writing Sarah Jane, but bring back Sarah Jane and Jo, and getting to talk about Classic Who, basically, which I'm sure is all the showrunners' all dreams to play in the Classic Who verse. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think Matt Smith did such a lovely job coming into a show that's not his,
right.
First of all, and just seamlessly being so fond of both of these women that presumably in real life he'd never met before.
I mean, even Liz Sladen, you see that this, David Tennant had been with her a few times by that point, so he could do that. But this is Matt meeting both Liz and Katie for the first time, presumably.
Well, and David Tennant is a self-proclaimed Who fan.
That's right. So he knew
very
Sarah
much
Jane.
So, yeah. And so these are going to be the characters that he had grown up with, whereas we don't. I don't know if Matt Smith watched Doctor Who at all.
He's a little young.
Yeah, he is. And so being able to come in and pick up that history, like we were talking about earlier, when Jo talks about her leaving, which happened, of course, with Jon Pertwee, Matt Smith's reaction is to not look at her in the same way that Jon Pertwee didn't look at her, which I think is such a lovely parallel. And, where that came from, how much research Smith did himself versus, how much the directors directed. I don't know, but it was such a lovely, real moment. And I just think that's, and I think one of Matt Smith's strengths as a doctor was his ability to play the old soul in a way that you would not expect.
And it made me wonder more with Katie, / Jo, because obviously Sarah at this point has been in the universe, copyright trademark. So because she's played with John, played with Tom, played with David, and now with Matt. And so, but for Katie, who's only played with John, as she's acting with Matt, is she trying to see John in Matt Smith's eyes? Is she trying to see the Third Doctor when she looks at the 11th Doctor? Trying to find her Doctor somewhere, as an interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really lovely. And getting a little bit of Jo wrap up, 7 children. How do you give birth to 7 children while you're hanging out in the Amazon? I don't know.
In a tea chest.
In a tea chest going down the river. Yeah, the whole thing is ridiculous. But yeah, her 7 children and 12 and a half grandchildren, and yeah. And that, the Santiago character, it would have made for another interesting spinoff.
Mm-hmm. Well, then we know there's Rio Grande. based on the Farewell Sarah Jane.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Oh, do we want to talk about the documentary at all?
Sure. Oh, which one? There's two weird
ones. The Matt Gaddis documentary.
Then there was the other weird one. But yeah, that one. Yeah, so then, Mark. Mark Gaddis did a sort of pseudo-documentary, I think it was a couple of years ago.
A mockumentary, shall we?
Well, of follow-up to the Green Death, where he's a roving conspiracy reporter interviewing the players from the Green Death afterwards of, I don't remember everyone's names, Erskine or whatever. I don't know. People,
but managed to get all of the actors from the original to come in and talk about it, which was just fantastic. It was brilliant. And, very well done. And in the end, unfortunately, he succumbs to the boss.
Who apparently is now head of the BBC.
Yep. Which, was to be expected. I found that lovely and tongue-in-cheek. Although it does contradict the death of the Doctor, because there's an interview with Professor Jones who says that they grew apart and were no longer together. And Joe tells us that's a big fat lie.
Maybe they got back together.
Yeah, she saw the mockumentary.
Yeah.
And realized what she was missing.
Just like Katie, says you don't have to live together when you're married, or not even married, but when you're in a relationship, whatever.
You don't even have to live on the same continent, apparently. As she has moved back to London and, as far as anyone knows, is still in a relationship with a guy in Australia.
Yeah, so. Oh, yes. But anyway, well, final thoughts about this series of the Third Doctor.
I have enjoyed this more than I've enjoyed any of the others.
And do you think it's the characters, or do you think it's that we've kept it, we're not jumping around randomly?
I think part of it's not jumping around, but I think I have so much love for all of these characters. And again, I think the extras gave us some of that, because you've got Katie Manning hanging out on a couch with the two army guys, waxing poetic, and so it's a combination of seeing how much affection they have for each other backstage, and then also that affection clearly brings itself to the screen as well, and so it's just warm and fuzzy. This has definitely been my favorite.
And how do you feel knowing we just have one series of the Third Doctor left?
I'm excited to see Sarah Jane and see how that changes, because I do know that Sarah Jane's a very different character. In fact, I'm particularly interested because in the extras they talked about the reason they got rid of Liz Shaw was that she was too competent, and that wasn't helpful to being able to explain things to the audience. And so it'll be interesting because Sarah Jane is sort of the quintessential competent companion.
And sort of to be broad, the women's lib character.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that, having gotten rid of somebody for that reason. And possibly, Liz Shaw was a scientist. Right. Whereas...
she's plucky reporter.
Sarah Jane's plucky reporter. And so still... potentially needs science explained and things like that. So I'm looking forward to that. And I can't wait to start the Sarah Jane era.
There you go. Well, with that, let's go into the TARDIS library.
Whoosh, whoosh.
When do you close your eyes?
I go to the library.
Go to the library now.
Well, for this one, we are going to do Book Report by Phillip.
Book Report by Phillip.
Should have my own music.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
But this is Doctor Who and the Krikketmen.
Spelled Krikkit.
By James Goss. This was 2019. I'm sort of flipping the page as I talk here. It's fairly recent. 2018. So this is a curious one because this is novel, of course. It's based on, and I read the foreword and afterward, and I've already forgotten it, but it's a Douglas Adams story, who, Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy, but also script editor of Doctor Who for a short time there, Shada and all that. And I can't remember how far he got in this story, but James Goss, who does a lot of Doctor Who stuff, if you remember, he was the one who did Shada, the Scream of the Shock, whatever, what I'm trying to say, the Ninth Doctor animated.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
Yeah. But he's done lots of stuff.
Basically. The, Richard E. Grant.
Yes. But he's done a lot of, basically, Douglas Adams finishing stories. He novelized City of Death and The Pirate Planet, which are both Douglas Adams Doctor Who stories with the Fourth Doctor. And has basically... So he's sort of a Douglas Adams guy, inasmuch and is a Doctor Who guy. And follow him on Twitter, and he's still active in the Doctor Who, doing lots of Doctor Who stuff. But anyway, all that's to say, so this is I think Douglas Adams originally had this as Sarah Jane and the Fourth Doctor, but James changed it to Romana.
Heresy.
The second Romana.
Heresy.
And the Doctor. Which actually I enjoyed, but it's very interesting because it's sort of basically, without going into all of it, the premise is that the Krikketmen are this ancient, let's say myth, but they turn out to be true, violent race. So basically, there's a xenophobic race. Well, they don't know they're xenophobic because they think they're the only ones that exist in the world. It's very like, if you know Douglas Adams, this is very much like Hitchhiker stuff. But anyway, they think they're the only planet there is, and then and they don't even look up. All this stuff. They think they're the only. Why would they ever look up? But anyway, their spacecraft crashes, and then they're like, well, this is crazy. We need to kill everything. And so they build all these crazy robots. The crazy robots are the Krikketmen. And they look like, and so basically when the book starts off with the Doctor and Romana going to see cricket match, and then they're horrified that the Earthers, or the Terrans, have created this game based on this deadly species, which the Time Lords had to trap into a time bubble or something like this. But anyway, and it kind of goes from there, because then, while they're watching a cricket match, the Krikketmen show up and attack. And they're trying to assemble...
Ironic.
Yeah, and they have to assemble this... statue, for lack of a better word, to release the time lock on their planet, and it's like, it's like a cricket thing. Like there has to be like all the different parts to
the wickets and things like that. Okay,
and they're all in different parts of the universe, and so it's kind of like the Key to Time in a way, and where they have to sort of travel to all these different places and have these mini adventures on these mini planets to find the parts, and sometimes they lose, sometimes they win. And it's all just mickety-mackety. But, yeah. But it's interesting. I mean,
to quote Chris Cross, you're just going with the K's right now. I'm a little concerned about where that's going.
But largely, I enjoyed it. I mean, I think the only thing that I didn't enjoy is that I think James goes a little too Douglas Adams-y at times. Because, and I'm not an expert, but I mean, I've read enough, I think, semi-expert. I've read Dirk Gently, I've read all the Hitchhiker. And one or two of his other kind of random books, where Douglas Adams is like a lot of very smart, creative guys, like Seth MacFarlane, Dan Harmon.
Gets a little self-indulgent.
Yeah, you gotta. They're best when they're not like 110%.
Yeah.
They have their styles and they get a little too whimsical. Because I think there's times in this book that are a little jokey, which I mean, Douglas Adams is always gonna be funny, but like. There are some serious moments. There's parts where like lots of people are dying, and it's like it's not a time for a joke. I know, time and place, and
space, baby, time and space.
And so, other than that, and again, I don't know how much is him just copying and pasting, and how much like I think this is what Doug would say. But other than that, I think the Fourth Doctor's done very well. I think Romana's done very well because I don't often see her. I don't think I've read any Romana novelizations, so I thought it did very well. And so it's a longer book, but it does go by somewhat fast if you don't mind. Again, it's very, very Douglas Adams style, so if it's not for you, don't read it. But, if you like Hitchhiker, Dirk Gently, then definitely something to check out. So, yeah.
Cool. Thanks for that, baby.
Do I get a star or something?
Yep, right in your forehead. Hold still.
Do I get a free personal pan pizza yet?
Not yet. You've got 4 more novels to read.
Oh, yeah, they're all over there.
Yep.
Still, I need to read the ninth Doctor. He has a real name. I still read the Christopher Eccleston bio, and then I have the Sophie Aldred penned At Children's End novel, and then some other stuff.
Lots of good stuff.
Yeah. Well, until next time, enjoy the Doctor's adventures throughout time and space.
This is BBC Television.